Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. Get ready for the Biden stock boom. Yeah.
What?
Biden gets elected. It's happy days are here again.
Tank, I thought.
Not according to Ed Finn, former editor and president of Barron's. This is about as strained an argument as I've heard since we interviewed our friend Jimmy Pethokoukis from the American Enterprise Institute a couple weeks ago, and he was so beset with Trump derangement. He was making an argument similar to Ed Finn, stunningly, really. Over a 4-year Biden term, writes Ed Finn, there's reason to believe that the total return on stocks, including reinvested dividends, will average about 10% a year as they have for nearly a century. It's even possible U.S. investors will enjoy an annual stock return of 15% or better. So that argument Trump's making about your 401ks, don't sweat a Biden presidency.
It'll be okay, man.
Ed Finn does concede, yes, there are threats. The main threats Biden poses, increased regulation, higher taxes.
Yeah, all those regulations on small businesses are going to come back.
Yeah, also boosting corporate tax rates by a third from 21% to 28%. That is not pro-growth. Would put a dent, writes Ed Finn, a dent of about $130 billion in corporate profits each year. Another tax proposal would trigger a sell-off, and that's boosting the capital gains tax from 39.6% from the current 20% on income of more than $1 million. However, here's where it all washes out, according to Ed. If President Biden can control the federal budget deficit, well, that's funny. If he can forge better relationships with America's trading partners, if he can reverse some of President Trump's anti-immigration policies, and bring a more congenial atmosphere to the Beltway, there's no reason to think during his term average annual stock returns can't be in the 10% range. Given Biden's ambitious plans to use the increased tax revenue to fund more spending on green energy, healthcare, and infrastructure, it's conceivable he could spur the U.S. economy enough to push annual stock returns to 15%. Yeah. Sure. Government spending, that's what fuels investment and growth. Okay. All right. Well, let's check out Ed Finn's work with somebody else in the market space, and that is Jim Iuorio, CNBC contributor and entrepreneur, proprietor of Brant's in Palatine, Illinois. Jim, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
So is Ed Finn, does he got that about right?
No, he doesn't. And here, okay, before I tell him why he's wrong, well, I'll say if he made the argument, and this goes for Jimmy as well, and Jimmy's a friend of mine, and I believe his heart's always in the right place. If they said to me that similar to the Obama presidency, that the government would be increasing regulations, increasing tax, and the Federal Reserve would have no choice but to counterbalance those incompetent economic policies with free money for the entire time, the stock market could do okay. I mean, that's what we saw for an 8-year period during Obama. But if you want to look me in the eyes and say that increasing regulation, jumping up the tax rates of corporate America is going to be good for the stock market, which is a glimpse of corporate America, it's comical at best.
Well, right, and look, and not to mention the industrial policy piece of it, the government making all these investments in green energy and infrastructure. You can understand why some people are confused because that's essentially what the government has done with Tesla in allowing Tesla to exist parasitically in part off the profits of other car companies, in addition to the generosity of the U.S. taxpayer through the subsidy of electric cars. So you say, well, there you go, the Tesla model, and look at that. That has a bigger market cap than all of the automakers combined, all the American automakers combined. So we just need to replicate that in all across sectors, and then it'll be a chicken in every pot.
Sure, we'll win. No, and I wish we could just say it was just Tesla. And I know you're just giving that as one example of government spending money. But if you're going to tell me just for a second that the government's going to make investments that are going to be better than free market capitalism making investments, it's absurd. It's silly. And it brings, I know you mentioned the capital gains tax before, and I know it's being knocked around that it's potentially being lowered. And that's one of the reasons the stock market is relatively buoyant today, along with the news out of Russia of a potential vaccine. But the capital gains tax is kind of exactly what we're talking about here. Every time that particular tax rate is lowered, not higher, lowered, tax receipts from that tax go up, not down. And Barack Obama knew that. He admitted it. He acknowledged it in a 2008 debate with Hillary Clinton, where that statistic was given to him, and he said it's not a question about raising tax revenues. It's about fairness.
Fairness.
Well,
right.
I don't know what the heck that means. But fairness. I want if you believe that the government needs to pull in tax money to do the things that they want, infrastructure, and this is completely independent of MMT. I know I'm rambling here for a second, but hopefully I'll be able to pull it all together. I know that's completely independent of new modern monetary theory, but it's just why do you want to have a punitive government? And then, to me, then the Fed comes in and zeroes everything out and makes free money and creates this bubble bust economy like we've seen twice in the last 25 years.
You pulled that together nicely. Way to stick the
Yeah,
landing.
good job.
Yeah.
Appreciate
You were a little,
Perfect 10.
little
I was
shaky,
off on it.
but
Yeah, I
you
was
stuck the
shaky.
landing. Yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah.
But by the way, before we get to middle income tax relief, with the president sort of hinted at yesterday, along with capital gains cut, and I think he's just going to do everything unilaterally now that the Roberts Court has allowed him to do so. Wait for a future president, maybe him, to undo these executive orders somehow, some way. But payroll taxes. So the payroll tax suspension for incomes under 100,000, the executive order, one of the executive orders he signed on Friday, that was pilloried in part by Biden and the left as, you're bankrupting Medicare and Social Security, which, of course, by the way, are not solvent to begin with. The payroll tax can't finance either one of those, but that's a secondary issue. Joe Biden, Chris Jacobs over at Juniper Research, a good piece in the Journal as well. Joe Biden and wife Jill, $13.3 million in income from book royalties and speaking fees. They ran their speaking fees and book royalties through an S corp rather than treating them as taxable wages, and that allowed them to avoid about $750,000 in payroll taxes over the last 2 years. 95% of their they circumvented the payroll tax on 95% of their income. One tax expert told the Journal that Biden's scheme was pretty aggressive in terms of payroll tax avoidance. And so Trump's suspension of the payroll tax, the maximum payroll tax is like 1/250th of the amount that Biden's avoided in 2017 and 2018, according to the tax returns they released. So again, here we have the champagne socialist, do what I say, not what I do.
How dare you? How dare you suggest that there's some hypocrisy among these people? That's absurd. I mean, clearly there's not. He told us he wants to pay more taxes and he wants people to pay more taxes. He's glad to do so. I get in this argument all the time at cocktail parties, and I don't even, that I consider myself a conservative, a huge conservative. I don't even like to say Republican. However, when we have this discussion at cocktail parties, when a Democrat bends over backwards and even potentially illegally avoids taxes, in my mind, it's far, far worse than a Republican does it. A Republican looks you in the eye and says, yeah, I don't want the government to have more money. I don't want the government to have more of my money. They're poor stewards of money. So if I bend over backwards for tax avoidance, nothing illegal, of course, I personally believe that's fine. When a Democrat does it like that, it's the height of hypocrisy. It's always do as I say, not as I do. And it's even like, I don't know if you saw the Robert Reich thing, Robert Reich was a big voice on the left, and part of the thing he was talking about was being able in neighborhoods, not having a neighborhood that's, I'm doing quotation marks, a rich neighborhood, be able to move housing in there. And then they pulled out a letter that he had wrote to a homeowners association that was complaining about a historic house being torn down. And again, it always comes back to do as I say. These rules are for me and you, Dan. They're not for Robert Reich and for Joe Biden. So
well, and also they're not
Right.
for Governor Pritzker. I mean, he's still under investigation for taking the toilets out in his home to the tune. And they paid him back. His wife, MK, paid Maria Pappas back, but that still doesn't mean you didn't commit the crime. So if I steal something from a store and I bring it back, I still committed the crime and I still have to do the time.
Not
in Chicago. That's not a crime in Chicago.
Of course not. He said he was sorry, Amy. What do you want? No, of course, it's absolutely absurd. It's been absurd the whole time. When I call this show, I'm usually so calm, and you guys get my blood going so quickly. It's better than coffee. Yeah, do as I say, not as I do. It's absurd. It's comical.
Well, Jim, I wanted to get your take on the unemployment benefits. President Trump said, take it from $600 to $400. Do you still think that might be even too much money?
Well, okay, so I might go off what you guys would think I was going to say here. I don't think it's too much money. I think that the situation we're in, and I am not a fan of the lockdowns and particularly the way they were put in. But the fact is, they were put in, and they knocked 40 million people out of their jobs. I don't. I think that a few more months of this, particularly in light of some of notions we're getting that potentially Russia has a vaccine, and we've all seen hospitalizations falling in those Sunbelt states. But I don't mind loosening the purse strings in here. The problem has always been, and let's put the federal government along with the Federal Reserve in the same bucket here. The fact that the stock market's been rallying, the dollar's been cratering, and gold's been going higher. Now, and that's independent today, is not the belief that what they were doing now was too aggressive, but the belief that once it's not needed anymore, they will still hang around, as they've had the tendency to do for a long, long time. Now, I don't think we've gotten to that point yet where the party's starting to wind down and they're juicing up the punch bowl again. I do believe they will. I don't have confidence in them. Once they get a taste of everybody gets some money, you get money, you get money. Once they get a taste of that, it's rare that they pull back. But as of today, as of right now, I think it's fine.
Well, I disagree, and especially in the restaurant business, you've got to know. I'm sure you talk to others in that business. You've got to know that right now there's a problem finding good people who can work, and it's not because it's a tight labor market like it was prior to the pandemic. Talking to a friend of mine who's involved in one of the downtown business associations, so he talks to businesses, up and down a whole commercial district. And that's a real problem because, of course, you were being paid more to not work than to work. And that's still going to be the case for a whole host of people. Or even if you're not being paid more, if I get 75% of what I was making to not work, maybe I'll survive on that approximation of what I used to make for a little while longer before I really feel compelled to go back to work. That's not a good situation.
No, it's not a good situation at all. And I acknowledge that you are 100% correct in that. And I think with any policy like this, there's going to be a dark side. And when I say that I'm for it, I'm not, having a parade for it. I don't think it's the greatest thing in the world. I acknowledge that exists, that you're saying, and that's terrible. And that's why I think as these next, I don't even know if I'm going to say months, I might even say months, as this wears on, I want them to start pulling back these things and provide incentives for people to work. But I am concerned, and particularly the restaurant industry too. Some people who don't have any money don't go to restaurants. We've seen traffic gone up in restaurants to about 35% of what it was, but no higher than that. And I worry about there's an economic impact of cutting that all off too. And I think it will push a lot of people. I think ultimately, longer term, what you're saying is better for the economy. And I think, but shorter term, what I'm saying is, so that's where we're going to have to disagree on, I think.
I wanted to get your reaction to AOC, a noted economist.
She's my favorite.
She has weighed in on this. She thinks that she's a little upset with Andrew Cuomo, the America's governor, because he led the nation in the amount of COVID-19 deaths that occurred on his watch. So he's America's governor somehow.
Job.
She says it's time to stop protecting billionaires, Governor Cuomo, and pass a billionaire's tax. Billionaires need to cover the $13.3 billion in the New York State budget shortfall from COVID. And it has nothing to do with their management of the state. It's all COVID related. It's all billionaires' fault, and they need to pay. That's only fair. As AOC has now famously said, billionaires need the working class. The working class doesn't need billionaires.
Oh, gosh. Okay, well, here's what she's missing. And who was it, by the way, who said the only thing is unavoidable is death and taxes? I always forget who said that. But it doesn't really matter because I think the left has it in their head that you impose a tax and then the person you impose the tax on pays the tax. I think they forget about the fact that billionaires have unbelievable amount of choices. Okay, when Detroit back in the 70s, when there was green flight and all the money left Detroit, was because they started taxing the heck out of people and they moved outside the city limits. Now, if you don't think New York's you don't think billionaires can get on a plane and be done with that city and just come and visit? It's absurd. It's an absurd notion, and everything that comes out of her mouth, like I think she can't say anything more dumb, and then I'm surprised the next day. It doesn't make me like mad or angry. It just makes me sad that people believe that, and Bill de Blasio as well.
He is Jim Iuorio. He is the proprietor of Brant's in Palatine, an excellent restaurant, and he's also a CNBC contributor. Jim, thanks as always for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, guys. I'll see you.
Thanks. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
The more you listen, the more you'll know. This is Chicago's Morning Answer. On AM 560. The Answer.
Families are spending more time together in the backyard on their outdoor patios and decks. So now's a great time to make your landscape everything you want it to be. AM Woodland Outdoor Design, along with Lots Custom Carpentry, are ready to make your outdoor adventures at home the best they can be. From patios to pergolas to outdoor kitchens and fire pits, even the practical stuff like complete drainage work to keep the rain out of your home. For all the projects you've been thinking about or putting off, they'd love to meet with you to discuss ideas. Count on the AM Woodland and Lots Custom Carpentry teams to be there for you, to beautify and make your home everything you've always wanted it to be. Local, family-owned businesses are so important for our communities, and your support is truly appreciated.
AM Woodland Outdoor Design and Lots Custom Carpentry, proudly serving Lake, McHenry, Northern Cook, and Kenosha counties. Visit amwoodland.com or call 847-224-2167.
Guys, I want to encourage you to take care of your health. It's easier than you think at Low T Center. They're reinventing